Hi, welcome to Exploring Sunday Scriptures for March the 1st. So these are the scriptures that will be incorporated into our worship for this coming Sunday, March the 6th, I believe it is, if I have my numbers right. That may be off for some reason. It feels a little off. But the first Sunday in March, which is a communion Sunday. So if you are joining us virtually, make sure that you do have some juice and some bread or a cracker nearby so that as we come to that aspect of worship on this first Sunday of the season of Lent, you are able to fully participate in that. As I just stated, this is one of the 2 Sundays in Lent that we also have communion as part of that, the first Sunday of March and the first Sunday of April, in addition to the special service of Maundy, Thursday. And in general, I tend to also include communion as part of Resurrection Sunday, Easter Sunday, as that's one of those places where we continue to encounter the risen Lord among us. We are beginning a new series which starts this Sunday, and that series is based off of this book. We also have 2 corresponding times for discussion over this book, The Witness at the Cross by Amy Jill Levine. So each of the chapters in this is exploring different witnesses present at the cross. And so really all of Lent is focusing on that singular event of the crucifixion, but particularly looking at and exploring the experience of each different observer or participant in that event and what that tells us about them, about the way that they are differently represented in each of the Gospels, and what that might then communicate to us in this particular day at this particular time. So you can get this. This is largely available through any of online booksellers if you look for it there. We're out of copies at the church, but if we do receive enough interest, we can order a bunch more in at the church. So we're going to be living with this for the next 6 weeks as the basis of our worship. The 2 studies, one is on Thursday. It's Zoom only. So that's a online option only for that discussion, which is at 1 o'clock every Thursday afternoon. The other option for conversation specifically on the chapters in this book will be on Sunday mornings following worship. So roughly around Sunday at 11 o'clock in the Wesley room here at the church, if you're able to join then. So we have an online option Thursdays at 1. And then an in-person option here at church in the Wesley room following worship. The sermons will be, in general, focused in the same way on the particular figures that are connected with each of the different chapters, but will undoubtedly take its own direction based on specifically the scriptures that are covered. It will incorporate some of the things that are brought up through the book, but will not be intentionally trying to teach that book or use that book as the primary source material for the sermons. So this Sunday, the first full chapter, even though the introduction covers the content of the book generally, and then takes a look specifically at the person of Simon of Cyrene, who is the bystander that's asked to carry the cross, to help carry the cross to the place where the crucifixion takes place. I'm skipping over Simon just because it's very, very brief in the introduction and focusing on the first of the full chapters that's present within this book, which is focused on the bystanders and the scoffers. So the bystanders are sort of the unnamed people that are present as Jesus hangs on the cross or pass by as he's hanging on the cross. And the scoffers are sort of a general term for those who make fun of Jesus who is hanging on the cross. So these are our first witnesses that we are going to look at and the perspectives that they offer. So in our time together exploring Sunday Scriptures, some of these particular chapters or witnesses are contained with only just a verse or 2. And some of them are comprised within longer passages. This is a time in which all of our scriptures are coming from the synoptic gospels. So that's Matthew, Mark, and Luke. And optic means see, and sin is together or same, so saw together. So the synoptic gospels sort of correlate into sharing the same stories or source materials, seeing the story of Jesus similarly or together. There could be reference to John's gospel, but in general, he doesn't have the same bystanders present, and so I've just reserved it to the synoptics, with Mark and Matthew representing longer passages and just a single verse from the Gospel of Luke. So I'll begin with Mark, and as is my usual custom, I have two translations, the New Revised Standard Version and the Message, to provide two very different variations on the same passage. The New Revised Standard is what the Pew Bible here at Christ Church is, in general, where I begin with my own research. I might then go to some original language sources, so to the Greek of the Bible itself. There are particular words or passages that I'm trying to figure out and discern a little more about. But the New Revised Standard is a pretty accurate word-for-word translation, so it gets us very close to that original language as much as we can in English. And the Message really is more of a contemporary English updated paraphrase. So it doesn't attempt nor state at the outset that it's trying to be completely accurate to the original language. It's trying to be accurate to the general impression, you might say. So I'm going to read the Mark passage first, talk a little bit about the Mark passage, then move to the the Matthew passage, talk a little bit about that, and conclude then with that single verse from Luke. Remember, our focus here is on the bystanders, so the unnamed people, and the scoffers, those who are making fun, taunting Jesus. So Mark chapter 15, verses 29 through 37, first from the New Revised and then the Message. Those who passed by derided Jesus, shaking their heads and saying, "Aha, you who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross." In the same way, the chief priests, along with the scribes, were also mocking him among themselves and saying, "He saved others, he cannot save himself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now so that we may see and believe." Those who were crucified with him also taunted him. When it was noon, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m. At 3 o'clock, Jesus cried out with a loud voice, "Eloi, Eloi, lema sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you forsaken me?" When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, "Listen, he's calling for Elijah." And someone ran, filled a sponge with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink, saying, "Wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to take him down." Then Jesus gave a loud cry and breathed his last. Here's the Message. People passing along the road jeered, shaking their heads in mock lament. "You bragged that you could tear down the temple and then rebuild it in 3 days. So show us your stuff. Save yourself. If you're really God's son, come down from that cross." The high priests, along with the religion scholars, were right there mixing it up with the rest of them, having a great time poking fun at him. He saved others, but he can't save himself. Messiah is he, King of Israel? Then let him climb down from that cross. We'll all become believers then. Even the men crucified alongside him joined in the mockery. At noon, the sky became extremely dark. The darkness lasted 3 hours. At 3 o'clock, Jesus groaned out of the depths, crying loudly, "Eloi, Eloi, lama sabachthani," which means, my God, why have you abandoned me?" Some of the bystanders who heard him said, "Listen, he's calling for Elijah." Someone ran off, soaked a sponge in sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink, saying, "Let's see if Elijah comes to take him down." But Jesus, with a loud cry, gave his last breath. All right, so our focus here again is on the bystanders, those who make fun of Jesus. In Mark's passage, where we find them, and we pick up right in that first verse with them, it's those who pass by. Now, it's interesting as much as we tend in our imaginations to focus on the crucifixion based on the pain and the actual action of the nails and the cross, there is very little written in the Gospels about those things. The majority of our passage of the crucifixion is really about these interactions that happen. And so we could say that really the pain that's associated in this passage is less about the physical pain, though undoubtedly that is a huge component of crucifixion and its intention in being carried out by the empire as torture. But the real psychological, the social torture that's going on. And the passages and all of these people that are present, these witnesses at the cross, highlight that particular pain that's being associated here. So the first thing we have in the Gospel of Mark is exactly that, those passing by. It's not even necessarily expressing that they're there to witness, partake, or anything else, but they're simply going about their business and casting off these remarks, not expecting to be answered in any way. So we see sort of a callousness in that regard, to that it is a human being that is hanging there, that it is somebody's son, that it is somebody's friend. It is not that at all. But it's also referencing the charge that was brought against Jesus, which has to do with sedition in some ways and blasphemy, in this sense of, this is what you said, but now here you are in this position unable to show that to be. Now it's failing to grasp already really what the message of Jesus was, let alone that the salvation offered is one that is experienced in community. We can look back at many of the healings of Jesus, and though they do come by way of Jesus, oftentimes Jesus is not an agent that is doing magic, but really someone that's saying that faith has already made the ailment subside or go away. Whereas this is calling for that more direct interaction. We have the chief priests and scribes then also sort of participating in the same reality. Now, it says in the NRSV, mocking him among themselves. So this encourages sort of a sense that this isn't heard outside of their own circle. It is admitting, I'm going to sneeze, excuse me. Excuse me. It admits at the beginning that he did save others. He saved others. So we have sort of a fact put out there by the officials, but then that recanted or taken back with, he cannot save himself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now so that we may see and believe. So it was always faith that was the action that made the salvation of others possible. They are switching that formula around and asking for the action to precede the faith. So make the healing precede the faith, which is not the order of things. Moreover, the same thing that they have condemned him to death for is what they are now asking the proof of. And also admitting in some ways that happened. He saved others. And those also crucified with him taunted him, it says. We have Jesus's last words, which are in Aramaic, and it is a quote of a psalm. That quote, my God, why hast thou forsaken me?" is really about not the abandonment of God, but a sense that God is always listening, even when we can't necessarily feel the presence of God. So we have that as what he is saying, quoting something from Scripture, something that would have been familiar to him. Based on his saying this, we have other instances in the gospel accounts where Aramaic is used in healings. And so it could be a sense in some ways that he's saying something, I don't want to say magical, but saying something that's associated with other miracles of Jesus. And so they're wanting to prolong. So the use of wine here in this passage is to dull the pain in order to prolong his life, to see if something's going to take place. So that's why we have this sponge and sour wine to give it to him to drink, is to act in that way, to dull the pain, to prolong his life. But instead, moreover, then we have this random person saying, let's see if Elijah is going to come and take him down. Well, we've had two instances of the reappearance of Elijah, first in the person of John the Baptist, and secondly in the transfiguration of Jesus. So there was a time where Hebrew people were looking for this return of Elijah. Well, we've already had those accounts, and so that is not going to happen. And then we have the conclusion of the passage with his last breath. The Message variant doesn't really change much there. If anything, I don't think that it emphasizes it as much that the high priests were really talking among themselves. Another interesting fact about the presence of the temple authority is they likely would not have come to that because there was a sense of ritual defilement associated with being around dying or death. And so based on their positions in the temple, they would have wanted to impair those positions or their ability to carry out their duties by being near or in the presence of any of those things. So whether there is real historical accuracy to that is difficult to know. Let me shift over to Matthew's passage. This is very similar. Matthew 27, 40 through 50. I'm again going to read the New Revised Standard and then the Message variant. You should hear similarities to Mark, but I encourage you to try to find the differences, because that really begins to emphasize sort of the different things that we get, the different theologies that we get from very similar passages, but two different authors, perhaps trying to communicate in these small ways significant differences to their communities. And saying, you who would destroy, so this is the crowd and the bystanders, you who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross. In the same way, the chief priests also, along with the scribes and elders, were mocking him, saying, he saved others, he cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we'll believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now if he wants to. For he said, I am God's son. The bandits who were crucified with him also taunted him in the same way. From noon on, darkness came over the whole land until 3 p.m, and about 3 o'clock, Jesus cried with a loud voice, Eli, Eli, lema sabachthani. That is, my God, why have you forsaken me? When some of the bystanders heard it, they said, this man is calling for Elijah. At once one of them ran, got a sponge, and filled it with sour wine, put it on a stick, and gave it to him to drink. But the others said, wait, let us see whether Elijah will come to save him. And then Jesus cried again with a loud voice and breathed his last. People passing along the road jeered, shaking their heads. Oh, that's the end of it. And this is the message. People passing along the road jeered, shaking their heads in mock lament. You bragged you could tear down the temple and then rebuild it in 3 days. So show us your stuff. Save yourself. If you're really God's son, come down from that cross. The high priests, along with the religious scholars and leaders, were right there mixing it up with the rest of them, having a great time poking fun at him. He saved others, he can't save himself. King of Israel is he? Then let him get down from that cross. We'll all become believers then. He was so sure of God, we'll let him rescue his son now if he wants him. He did claim to be God's son, didn't he? Even the two criminals crucified next to him joined in the mockery. From noon to 3, the whole earth was dark. Around mid-afternoon, Jesus groaned out of the depths, crying loudly, Eli, Eli, lama sabachthani, which means, my God, why have you abandoned me? Some bystanders who heard him say it said, He's calling for Elijah. One of them ran and got a sponge soaked in sour wine and lifted it on a stick so he could drink. The others joked, "Don't be in such a hurry. Let's see if Elijah comes and saves him." But Jesus, again, crying out loudly, breathed his last. So you hear a lot of almost direct parallels between the two passages that are there. Small differences. So we have, "You who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross." We had, "You who would destroy the temple," right? So you who would destroy the temple and build it in 3 days, save yourself and come down from the cross. If you are the Son of God is the addition here. If you are the Son of God, come down from the cross. Similarly, we have a tweak or change in the chief priest. He saved others. He cannot save himself. He is the King of Israel. Let him come down from the cross now, and we will believe in him. He trusts in God. Let God deliver him now if he wants to, for he said, "I am God's son." And here we had, he saved others. He cannot save himself. Let the Messiah, the King of Israel, come down from the cross now so that we may see and believe. So quite a bit more that is attributed here to what they said. Again, we have that parallel or that sense that there is an acknowledgement that Jesus did save others, that there were acts there, but that he lacks the capacity here to save himself. One of the ways of seeing this is how the bystanders and even the mocking that's going on here serves as a temptation, that it is acknowledging the power that Jesus has, and it is inviting his temptation to use that power for his own means, for his own salvation, which is not how Jesus ever uses his power. It's a great parallel to this first Sunday in Lent, when we typically hear of the beginning of Jesus's ministry in the temptations in the wilderness. So how this becomes, in a time of weakness, a great temptation. Now, we don't hear Jesus being tempted in the sense that Jesus envisions or sees the possibility, but it's hard not to believe that based on the physical as well as the social, psychological pain that he is in, that there wouldn't be a temptation to somehow do something different in order to escape from that. What else can I find here? The cry is the same, so it comes from, again, the book of Psalms. If we think of it as relating to this idea of temptation, it's interesting to have Jesus then lean back on God, knowing that God is always listening, but feeling somewhat separated from God, to avoid responding to the temptation. And like the first, we have also the drink being offered to him. Here he does not drink. The other one says, gave it to him to drink. Wait, let's see. We don't have in either one whether it actually reached Jesus, but in both cases it's brought up to Jesus's mouth. One is called sour wine, and in Matthew, sour wine again to him to drink. And both times it's thinking that I want to prolong things to see if Elijah is going to show up. So the last passage here is a single verse. And so the reason for just a single verse is this is the only occasion in Luke where we have bystanders largely mocking. There's other things that come from Luke, but with Matthew and Mark offering so much more, Luke just offers this little bit. And this is just the 35th verse of chapter 23. And the people stood by watching, but the leader scoffed at him, saying, "He saved others, let him save himself if he is the Messiah of God, his chosen one." And the Message variant, the people stood there staring at Jesus. And the ringleaders made faces, taunting, "He saved others, let's see him save himself, the Messiah of God, ha, the chosen, ha." So one of the interesting things here is we have the people stood by watching. So the other passages have the people passing along, so people going by. It's less a matter of observation, of being there. The ones who are there to observe in all three passages appear to be those who lead at the temple. But we have in Luke's version many more there just watching. But they're not the ones that jeer. It was only the leaders in Luke's version that mock him. So the bystanders in Luke's version are innocent bystanders that are watching, sort of in shock horror, we would think. But we also don't know that, as within the public reality of that time, public execution was something that people showed up for. So this is as much entertainment as you can think of anything else. It was a warning, certainly, by the authority, but it was also its own form of entertainment, something that went on. So we have to assume that this did tend to gather attention, and so also then gather a crowd. That crowd could have been anybody. It wouldn't necessarily been anybody who knew who the three people hanging on the crosses were or what they had done. So the only way perhaps they might have found out about that is by those such as the temple authority who've come there to jeer at him themselves, to sort of laugh at his peril and his expense. So we're going to be dealing with some weighty stuff. But in this weighty stuff is not only a question of where we position ourselves and how we position ourselves as we continue to look at the marks of the crucifixion that are emblazoned across our world, and injustice and hunger, oppression, and all those different things that we know exist. But how we either walk by and scoff at them, or how we are invited to participate, to form community in order to respond to them. Brief start into this. Again, if you haven't gotten one of these books yet, I encourage you to do so as our major focus for this season of Lent. And I encourage you to really enter this time in this season as an opportunity to grow in your faith and grow closer with God. Thanks as always for joining me for Exploring Sunday Scriptures, and I'll see you next week.